The rejection hurt more than anyone ever knew because it did not happen only once. It happened in conversations where your words were ignored. It happened in rooms where you felt invisible. It happened when people misunderstood your intentions, questioned your heart, overlooked your efforts, and failed to recognize the depth of what you carried inside. For many years you may have wondered why acceptance seemed to come so easily to others, while you repeatedly found yourself standing on the outside looking in. You tried to be kind. You tried to be patient. You tried to become everything people wanted you to be, yet somehow it still felt as if you never quite belonged. That experience leaves marks on the heart that are difficult to explain. It creates a loneliness that exists even when surrounded by people. It creates exhaustion that cannot be fixed by rest alone. It creates moments when you begin to question your own value simply because so many others failed to see it. Yet there is a truth that many people never discover until much later in life. Rejection is not always evidence that something is wrong with you. Sometimes it is evidence that there is something within you that has not yet found the environment where it can flourish. A seed can appear useless when placed on a hard surface, but its value changes completely when it reaches the soil it was created for. In the same way, many chosen people spend years feeling unwanted because they are attempting to grow in places that were never meant to sustain their purpose. The pain of rejection often feels personal. It feels like a judgment. It feels like a declaration that you are not enough. But many times it is simply a sign that your journey is leading somewhere different. The chosen often carry qualities that the world does not immediately celebrate. They value sincerity in a world that rewards appearances. They value loyalty in a culture of convenience. They value depth in environments that often prefer superficiality. Because of this, they frequently feel out of step with those around them. They notice things others ignore. They feel burdens others do not see. They wrestle with questions that most people never ask. This difference can create misunderstanding long before it creates recognition. There were seasons when you gave your best and received very little in return. There were moments when your kindness cost you more than most people will ever understand. You showed up for others when nobody showed up for you. You carried burdens that few people ever noticed. You continued moving forward while silently fighting battles that nobody knew existed. Those experiences were not easy. They left scars. They left disappointments. They left memories that still sting when they return unexpectedly. Yet they also produced something else. They developed strength. They developed compassion. They developed wisdom. Every difficult season taught you something about endurance. Every closed door taught you something about resilience. Every rejection forced you to discover parts of yourself that would have remained hidden during easier times. One of the most painful realities for the chosen is that many people only recognize value after it has been revealed. Before purpose becomes visible, it often remains misunderstood. Before strength becomes obvious, it is frequently underestimated. Before a person steps into their calling, they are often judged according to appearances rather than potential. Throughout life, there are countless examples of people who were dismissed before they were appreciated. They were overlooked before they were celebrated. They were rejected before they were embraced. The period before purpose emerges is often marked by confusion because neither the chosen person nor the people around them fully understand what is being prepared. This creates tension. It creates uncertainty. It creates seasons when it feels as though nothing is happening. Yet beneath the surface, something important is taking place. Character is being formed. Perspective is being refined. Faith is being strengthened. The foundation is being built. God often works in ways that are quiet long before they become visible. The greatest transformations frequently begin where nobody is looking. While others measure progress through recognition, God often measures progress through growth. While others focus on applause, God focuses on preparation. While others pay attention to visible success, God is shaping the invisible qualities that will sustain a person when success finally arrives. That is why some of your greatest victories happened in silence when nobody was watching. There were days when getting out of bed was a victory. There were moments when refusing to give up was a victory. There were seasons when continuing to believe despite disappointment was a victory. Nobody applauded those moments, yet they mattered deeply. Those hidden victories became part of the strength that now lives within you. The fact that you are still standing says more about your strength than you realize. Many people would have become bitter after experiencing what you experienced. Many would have stopped trying. Many would have allowed disappointment to harden their hearts. Yet despite everything, part of you kept believing. Part of you kept hoping. Part of you continued searching for meaning even when circumstances suggested otherwise. That persistence is not weakness. It is evidence of extraordinary resilience. Rejection often attempts to convince people that their story is over. It whispers that they have missed their opportunity. It suggests that they have been forgotten. Yet some of the most meaningful chapters begin after the seasons that seemed most discouraging. The chosen frequently discover that what felt like permanent loss was actually redirection. What felt like abandonment was often protection. What felt like delay was preparation. Looking back, many people realize that the opportunities they desperately wanted would have taken them away from the path they were meant to follow. The relationships they mourned would have limited their growth. The acceptance they sought would have required them to compromise pieces of themselves that were never meant to be surrendered. This realization does not erase the pain, but it gives the pain meaning. It allows a person to see that suffering was not wasted. Not every battle you fought was in vain. Not every tear was meaningless. Not every disappointment was permanent. The seasons that tested you were also shaping who you were becoming. They taught you how to endure uncertainty. They taught you how to find strength when external support was absent. They taught you how to trust that your value exists, even when nobody else recognizes it. That lesson is powerful, because there will always be people who misunderstand you. There will always be people who underestimate you. There will always be environments that fail to appreciate what you bring. If your worth depends entirely on their approval, you will spend your life feeling unstable. But when you learn that your value is rooted in something deeper, everything changes. You begin to understand that your identity is not determined by rejection. Your future is not determined by disappointment. Your purpose is not determined by the opinions of those who failed to see your potential. God saw the tears that nobody else noticed. God saw the prayers spoken in private. God saw the nights when you questioned everything. God saw the courage it took to keep moving forward when your heart felt heavy. None of it escaped his attention. Even when you felt invisible to the world, you were never invisible to him. There is something deeply comforting about knowing that your struggles were witnessed, even when nobody else understood them. The chosen often spend years developing quiet strength, because their greatest growth occurs away from public attention. Their confidence becomes rooted in character rather than praise. Their faith becomes rooted in experience rather than convenience. Their resilience becomes rooted in survival rather than comfort. These qualities cannot be manufactured overnight. They are developed through seasons of testing. They are refined through challenges. They are strengthened through perseverance. That is why rejection often appears before purpose. Purpose requires capacity. Purpose requires maturity. Purpose requires strength. The very experiences that seem to be working against you may have been developing the qualities necessary for the future that awaits you. The rejection was painful, but it did not define you. The loneliness was real, but it did not destroy you. The disappointments were heavy, but they did not erase your value. You are worth far more than the moments that tried to make you feel small. Your story has value, even if it did not unfold the way you expected. There is a strength within you that kept moving forward, even on your darkest days. There is a wisdom within you that was forged through experience. There is a purpose within you that does not disappear simply because it has not fully appeared yet. The chapters that felt empty were not empty at all. They were preparation. The seasons that felt forgotten were not forgotten. They were development. The years that seemed wasted were not wasted. They were building something that could not have been built any other way. If you have carried the weight of rejection for a long time, remember this: the opinions of others are not the final authority over your life. The disappointments of yesterday are not the blueprint for tomorrow. The doors that closed behind you do not determine the doors that may open ahead. What matters is that you continue moving forward with faith, courage, and hope. What matters is that you refuse to allow rejection to convince you that you have nothing valuable to offer. What matters is that you remember that God has not forgotten you. Your patience matters, your faith matters, your kindness matters, your endurance matters. The journey may have been difficult, but difficulty does not cancel destiny. Sometimes the very people who rejected you were never meant to accompany you into the next chapter. Sometimes the very obstacles that discouraged you were preparing you for a deeper purpose. Sometimes the very seasons that made you question everything were quietly leading you toward understanding. And when that understanding arrives, you may discover that the rejection was never proof of your lack of worth. It was simply part of the road that led you toward becoming who you were always meant to be. If this message helped you see your journey through a new lens and reminded you that your struggles were not without meaning, subscribe to the channel and continue walking this path with others who value faith, healing, perseverance, and purpose. May these messages continue to encourage your heart and remind you that your story still holds great value and hope ahead. There comes a point in the life of many chosen people when they stop asking why rejection keeps happening and begin noticing what rejection has been producing within them. This shift does not happen overnight. It usually emerges after years of disappointment, after countless moments of feeling overlooked, after carrying wounds that nobody else seemed to notice. At first, rejection feels like an enemy. It feels like a force that steals opportunities, relationships, confidence, and peace. It feels unfair. It feels personal. It feels as though life keeps closing doors that others walk through effortlessly. Yet with time, something unexpected begins to reveal itself. The very experiences that seem determined to break you often become the experiences that build you. The very moments that made you feel abandoned often become the moments that teach you how strong you truly are. Many chosen people spend years believing that acceptance would have solved all their pain. They imagine that being understood by everyone would have removed their loneliness. They imagine that being welcomed everywhere would have erased their insecurities. But life has a way of revealing deeper truths. Sometimes acceptance would have kept a person comfortable when they needed growth. Sometimes popularity would have distracted a person from purpose. Sometimes belonging everywhere would have prevented a person from discovering who they really were. Rejection often forces a level of self-discovery that comfort never requires. When applause disappears, you learn what truly motivates you. When validation becomes scarce, you learn whether your identity depends on the opinions of others. When people walk away, you learn what remains inside your heart when external support is removed. These lessons are difficult, but they are valuable. They shape the kind of strength that survives storms. They develop the kind of faith that remains steady when circumstances change. They create the kind of wisdom that cannot be taught through easy experiences. Many of the people watching this have spent years carrying invisible burdens. They smiled while their hearts were hurting. They showed kindness while fighting private battles. They encouraged others while feeling discouraged themselves. They remained faithful during seasons when nothing seemed to improve. Those sacrifices often go unnoticed by the world, but they are not meaningless. Every act of perseverance leaves a mark on the soul. Every choice to remain kind despite disappointment develops character. Every decision to continue hoping, despite setbacks, strengthens the spirit. There is a quiet dignity in refusing to surrender your goodness after life gives you reasons to become bitter. There is a quiet strength in continuing to believe that your story matters, even when evidence seems difficult to find. The chosen often become experts at surviving difficult seasons because they have been forced to walk through them repeatedly. They know what it feels like to be misunderstood. They know what it feels like to be judged unfairly. They know what it feels like to invest deeply in people who fail to appreciate them. Yet these same experiences often create extraordinary compassion. People who have suffered deeply tend to notice the pain of others more quickly. People who have walked through loneliness often become safe places for those who feel alone. People who have endured rejection frequently develop a sensitivity that allows them to encourage others in powerful ways. What once appeared to be a weakness becomes a source of strength. What once seemed like a disadvantage becomes a gift. The wounds become wisdom. The struggles become insight. The pain becomes purpose. This does not mean every hardship was pleasant. It does not mean every loss was easy. It simply means that suffering does not have the final word. There is a difference between being wounded and being defeated. Many chosen people were wounded, but they were never defeated. They cried, but they kept moving. They doubted, but they kept believing. They stumbled, but they kept standing back up. Their story continued because something within them refused to surrender. Perhaps that is one of the greatest signs that God was present all along, not necessarily because every circumstance changed immediately, but because He sustained them through circumstances that should have destroyed their hope. There were moments when you had less strength than you realized. There were days when you felt completely exhausted. There were seasons when you wondered how much more you could carry. Yet somehow you continued. Somehow you found enough courage for another day. Somehow you discovered enough faith for another step. Looking back, you may not even fully understand how you survived certain chapters. But you did survive them. And survival itself became evidence that God was working in ways you could not yet see. The future often looks different when viewed through the lens of faith rather than fear. Fear focuses on past disappointments and assumes they will repeat forever. Faith acknowledges pain, but refuses to believe that pain is the entire story. Faith remembers that seasons change. Faith remembers that growth takes time. Faith remembers that purpose often develops long before it becomes visible. Many chosen people become discouraged because they compare their timeline to the timeline of others. They look around and see people receiving opportunities, recognition, relationships, and blessings that seem delayed in their own lives. Comparison creates frustration because it ignores the unique path each person must travel. Not every journey unfolds at the same speed. Not every purpose emerges at the same moment. Some people experience rapid success, followed by struggles they never anticipated. Others spend years in preparation before stepping into seasons they could not have imagined. What matters is not whether your path looks identical to someone else's. What matters is whether you continue growing along the path God has placed before you. Rejection often teaches patience because it forces people to wait for the right opportunities rather than settling for the wrong ones. It teaches discernment because it reveals which relationships are healthy and which are not. It teaches resilience because it demands endurance. These lessons become valuable assets later in life. The very qualities developed during lonely seasons often become the qualities that sustain future blessings. A person who has learned gratitude during hardship appreciates opportunities more deeply. A person who has learned humility during obscurity handles recognition more wisely. A person who has learned perseverance during difficulty carries greater strength into future challenges. Nothing is wasted when God is involved in the process. The years that felt empty were teaching lessons that abundance alone could never teach. The losses that felt devastating were creating room for growth. The disappointments that felt permanent were often temporary chapters rather than permanent destinations. One of the most healing realizations a chosen person can experience is understanding that rejection says more about compatibility than worth. Not every person is meant to understand you. Not every environment is designed to support your growth. Not every relationship is intended to remain forever. When people fail to recognize your value, it does not automatically mean you lack value. Sometimes it simply means they are unable to see what God placed within you. A diamond remains valuable, even when hidden underground. Its worth does not depend on recognition. Its worth exists because of what it is. In the same way, your value is not created by acceptance, and it is not destroyed by rejection. Your value exists because you were created with purpose, dignity, and meaning. That truth becomes especially important during difficult seasons. When rejection accumulates, it can create false beliefs. It can convince people they are unlovable. It can convince people they are forgotten. It can convince people they have no future. These beliefs are powerful because they often grow from painful experiences, yet they remain false. Your future is not limited by what happened yesterday. Your potential is not defined by past disappointment. Your purpose is not erased because others failed to appreciate it. The chosen often carry gifts that become visible only after long periods of development. Patience develops slowly. Wisdom develops slowly. Character develops slowly. Faith develops slowly. These qualities rarely attract attention during the process, but they become incredibly valuable over time. That is why some of the strongest people are not always the loudest. Some of the wisest people are not always the most recognized. Some of the most impactful lives are built quietly, one faithful step at a time. If you have spent years feeling rejected, remember that rejection is a chapter, not a definition. It is an experience, not an identity. It is part of your story, but it is not the whole story. The person you are becoming is greater than the disappointments you have endured. The strength being developed within you is greater than the obstacles you have faced. The purpose waiting ahead is greater than the seasons that tried to convince you to quit. God has not forgotten the prayers you prayed. He has not ignored the tears you shed. He has not overlooked the sacrifices you made. He sees the full picture, even when you see only a small portion of it. And because he sees the full picture, he understands how every struggle, every delay, every rejection, and every difficult season can contribute to something meaningful. The road has been difficult, but difficulty does not mean abandonment. The journey has been long, but length does not mean failure. Sometimes the longest roads lead to the most meaningful destinations. Sometimes the deepest valleys develop the strongest faith. Sometimes the greatest preparation occurs during the seasons that appear least productive. Keep remembering that your story is still unfolding. Keep remembering that your value remains unchanged. Keep remembering that God is capable of bringing beauty from seasons that once seemed hopeless. The rejection may have shaped part of your journey, but it does not determine where your journey ends. If these words encouraged you and reminded you that your difficult seasons have meaning beyond what you can currently see, subscribe to the channel and continue receiving messages that strengthen faith, inspire personal growth, and bring comfort during life's hardest moments. You do not have to walk this journey alone, and there is hope ahead, even when the path feels uncertain. One day, many chosen people reach a moment of clarity that changes the way they view their entire past. The rejection that once looked like proof of failure begins to look different. The loneliness that once felt like punishment begins to reveal another purpose. The closed doors that once caused so much grief begin to make sense in ways they never could before. This realization does not arrive because every question is answered. It arrives because wisdom has been gained. It arrives because perspective has grown. It arrives because enough distance now exists between the pain and the present moment to recognize lessons that were invisible before. What seemed random was often preparation. What seemed unfair was often protection. What seemed like an ending was often a redirection towards something better suited to who you were becoming. Many people spend years wishing they could erase the painful chapters of their lives. They imagine that happiness would have been easier if the rejection had never happened. They imagine that confidence would have been stronger if they had always been accepted. They imagine that peace would have been greater if disappointment had never entered their story. Yet when they look honestly at the person they have become, they often discover something surprising. The strength they now possess was forged through difficulty. The wisdom they now carry was earned through experience. The compassion they now offer others was born from understanding suffering firsthand. The resilience they now depend on was developed because they had no choice but to keep moving forward. Without realizing it, the very seasons they wanted to escape were shaping qualities that would become some of their greatest gifts. There is something powerful about surviving experiences that once seemed impossible. It changes the way you see yourself. It changes the way you see the future. It changes the way you see God. Before those battles, you may have doubted your ability to endure hardship. After surviving them, you know there is a strength within you that is far greater than you once believed. You know what it means to continue despite fear. You know what it means to remain faithful despite uncertainty. You know what it means to keep going when there is no applause, no recognition, and no guarantee of immediate results. Those lessons become treasures that cannot be taken away. The chosen often underestimate how much they have grown because growth feels ordinary when you live with it every day. You do not always notice how much stronger you have become because the change happened gradually. You do not always notice how much wiser you have become because wisdom develops quietly. You do not always notice how much healing has occurred because healing often unfolds one small step at a time. Yet if you could travel back and meet the version of yourself from years ago, You might be surprised by what you see. You would see someone who has survived battles they once feared would destroy them. You would see someone who carries greater understanding. You would see someone who has developed patience, endurance, and perspective. You would see someone who has learned that life is rarely as simple as it first appears. Most importantly, you would see someone who kept going. That matters more than you realize. In a world where many people quit when things become difficult, perseverance is powerful. In a culture that often celebrates instant results, endurance is remarkable. In seasons where discouragement is common, hope becomes a quiet act of courage. The chosen are often people who continue believing long after circumstances suggest they should stop. They continue planting seeds even when harvests seem distant. They continue extending kindness even after experiencing disappointment. They continue choosing faith even when certainty is unavailable. These choices may appear small in the moment, but over time they create extraordinary outcomes. Every act of perseverance becomes another brick in the foundation of the future. Every moment of courage strengthens the heart. Every decision to keep moving forward creates momentum that carries a person farther than they imagined possible. One of the most beautiful truths about purpose is that purpose is not dependent on universal approval. If it were, very few people would ever fulfill it. History is filled with individuals who were doubted before they were respected, rejected before they were appreciated, and misunderstood before they were understood. Their value existed long before recognition arrived. Their purpose existed long before others acknowledged it. The same principle applies today. The fact that someone failed to see your worth does not mean your worth was absent. The fact that someone underestimated your potential does not mean your potential was limited. The fact that someone walked away does not mean you were destined to walk alone forever. Sometimes people leave because they are unable to accompany you into the next season. Sometimes doors close because they lead away from your future rather than toward it. Sometimes rejection creates space for opportunities that could not have appeared otherwise. This understanding brings peace because it allows you to release the burden of trying to convince everyone to recognize your value. You do not need universal approval to have purpose. You do not need constant validation to have worth. You do not need every person to understand you in order to live a meaningful life. Your identity becomes stronger when it is rooted in truth rather than popularity. Your confidence becomes healthier when it grows from character rather than applause. Your hope becomes steadier when it is anchored in faith rather than circumstances. God often works through processes that seem slow from a human perspective. Seeds spend time underground before they become visible. Foundations are built before structures rise. Preparation occurs before opportunities appear. The chosen frequently experience long seasons of unseen development because unseen development is often necessary. It is during these seasons that faith deepens. It is during these seasons that priorities become clearer. It is during these seasons that emotional healing takes place. Some wounds cannot heal while life is moving at full speed. Some lessons require quiet. Some growth requires solitude. Some transformations require time. Looking back, you may discover that certain seasons were not delaying your purpose. They were preparing you for it. The rejection that felt so painful may have been preventing you from settling for less than you were meant to experience. The loneliness that felt so heavy may have been creating space for deeper growth. The disappointments that seemed meaningless may have been teaching lessons that later became invaluable. None of this means the pain was easy. It simply means the pain was not wasted. God has a remarkable ability to bring meaning from experiences that once seemed meaningless. He has a remarkable ability to create strength from weakness, wisdom from struggle, and hope from disappointment. Many chosen people eventually realize that their greatest testimony is not found in a life without hardship. It is found in the fact that hardship did not defeat them. It is found in the fact that they remained kind after being hurt. It is found in the fact that they remained faithful after being disappointed. It is found in the fact that they remained hopeful after enduring seasons that could have produced despair. That kind of resilience inspires others. That kind of faith encourages others. That kind of perseverance becomes a light for people who are still walking through their own difficult chapters. Perhaps that is one reason your journey matters so much. The lessons you learned may eventually help someone else survive their own storm. The encouragement you offer may become the strength another person desperately needs. The wisdom you gained may help someone avoid losing hope. Your story has value beyond what you can currently see. Every chapter contributed something meaningful. Every struggle taught something important. Every season developed qualities that continue to shape who you are today. The rejection was real, but it was never the entire story. The loneliness was real, but it was never the final chapter. The setbacks were real, but they never had the authority to define your destiny. What defines your story is the courage that kept you moving. What defines your story is the faith that refused to disappear. What defines your story is the strength that survived, even when circumstances were difficult. You carried burdens that few people ever noticed. Your kindness cost you more than most people will ever understand. God saw the tears that nobody else noticed. Some of your greatest victories happened in silence when nobody was watching. The seasons that tested you were also shaping who you were becoming. Not every battle you fought was in vain. There is a strength within you that kept moving forward even on your darkest days. You are worth far more than the moments that tried to make you feel small. The fact that you are still standing says more about your strength than you realize. As you move forward, carry this truth with you. Your purpose does not begin when everyone finally understands you. Your purpose does not begin when every wound is healed. Your purpose does not begin when life becomes perfect. Purpose often grows quietly in ordinary moments. It grows through daily faithfulness. It grows through continued kindness. It grows through perseverance. It grows through the simple decision to keep taking the next step. Trust that your journey still matters. Trust that your experiences still have meaning. Trust that God has not forgotten you. The rejection was part of the road, but it was never the destination. The struggle was part of the process, but it was never the conclusion. Your story is greater than the pain you endured, and the future still contains possibilities that your past could never erase. If this message resonated with your heart and reminded you that your struggles, patience, and faith still matter, subscribe to the channel and continue receiving encouragement for the journey ahead. Together we can continue exploring messages of hope, healing, purpose, and quiet strength that remind you that God has not forgotten your story and that your life carries deep value.